All right, today we are cracking open one of history's absolute greatest epics, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms. And look, we're not just here for the epic battles, cool as they are. No, we're here for something else, a masterclass in leadership that is, I'm telling you, just as sharp and relevant today as it was almost 2,000 years ago. So it all really boils down to this one big question, right? What does it actually take for a leader to become truly great? Because as we're about to find out, this ancient story gives us three very different and, very powerful answers to that exact question.
Okay, so let's set the stage. Picture this. It's 184 AD in China. The legendary Han Dynasty? Yeah, it's crumbling. A huge uprising called the Yellow Turban Rebellion has just created this massive power vacuum. So you've got these ambitious figures, guys like Cao Cao and Liu Bei, who step up, trying to restore order. But then the emperor dies, and just like that, the whole system just collapses. Total chaos. And out of that chaos, China fractures into three rival states: Wei, Shu, and Wu. You couldn't ask for a better or a tougher testing ground for leadership.
So here's how we're going to break this all down. We'll look at this ultimate test of leadership, then meet our three main players: Cao Cao, the Pragmatist, Liu Bei, the Moralist, and Sun Quan, the Inheritor. And stick around, because at the end, we'll get into a really interesting paradox that connects all of them. All right, so out of the ashes of this fallen dynasty, we get our three main contenders. And each one of them is going to carve out their own kingdom using a totally different playbook for leadership. So let's get right into it and meet these guys, starting with, well, probably the most formidable of the bunch. First up, we have Cao Cao, the founder of the state of Wei. This guy, he is the ultimate pragmatist. For him, everything, and I mean everything, boiled down to one single thing: results. He was sharp, he was systematic, and he had an incredible eye for talent.
But here's the thing about Cao Cao, and this is so important. His greatest strengths were also, the source of his biggest weaknesses. It's like they were two sides of the exact same coin. So yeah, he was unbelievably decisive and systematic, which is great. But that same quick-thinking decisiveness, it could turn into hasty, bad judgment in a heartbeat. And that brilliant calculating mind of his, well, it made him deeply, deeply suspicious of pretty much everyone, even his closest ally.
And if you want to see his genius in action, just look at the Battle of Guandu. I mean, get this. Cao Cao is facing an army of over 100,000 soldiers with a way smaller force. On paper, it's an impossible fight. He should have been crushed, but he wasn't. Through pure strategic brilliance and his uncanny knack for putting the absolute right person in the right job at the right time, he pulls off this legendary victory. It just goes to show, for him, it was all about using talent to get results. Okay, now, let's do a complete 180. Meet Liu Bei, the founder of Shu. People call him the Moralist, and for good reason. I mean, if Cao Cao was all about pure, cold pragmatism, Liu Bei was the exact opposite. He built his entire power base on a foundation of virtue, generosity, and this really deep sense of humility. And his character is just such a fascinating study. On one hand, his sincerity and his humility inspired this fierce, almost fanatical loyalty from his followers. People would die for this guy. But that same strong moral compass had its downsides for sure. He could be painfully indecisive, sometimes held back by his own principles. And when people he cared about were harmed, forget it. All that cool logic went out the window, and his decisions became totally driven by emotion. This quote right here really says it all about his whole philosophy. There's this famous story where he's trying to recruit the genius strategist, Zhuge Liang, and Liu Bei, this important warlord, travels through terrible weather to visit this guy's little hut. Not once, not twice, but 3 times before Zhuge Liang even agrees to meet with him. That just shows you he truly believed that anything precious, anything worthwhile, requires patience and deep respect. But listen, don't you dare mistake his humility for weakness, because Liu Bei was an absolute master of playing the long game. Case in point, while he was stuck serving under the super suspicious Cao Cao, he knew he was being watched constantly. So what does he do? He plays the fool. He starts gardening, acting all simple. He even pretends to be terrified of a thunderstorm, all just to seem harmless and non-threatening. And you know what? It worked like a charm. It bought him just enough time to plan his escape and eventually build his own power base. And that brings us to our third leader, who gives us a totally different model of power. This is Sun Quan of Wu, and we call him the Inheritor. See, unlike the other two, Sun Quan didn't build his kingdom from the ground up.
He actually inherited it when he was just a young man. So his big challenge was totally different. How do you lead a bunch of officials who are older and way more experienced than you are? Well, he figured it out. And the answer was patience and trust.
So his style was really one of a kind. His absolute superpower was being a patient listener. He was calm, he was deliberate, and he was fantastic at giving his team real ownership. But, of course, there's a flip side. All that listening sometimes made him hesitant. He'd hear too many conflicting opinions and he could get swayed or just slow to make a call when a fast decision was what was really needed. Really, his whole management style was about one thing: empowerment. Instead of barking orders at his veteran advisors, which probably wouldn't have worked anyway, he'd coach them. He'd ask these thoughtful, guiding questions that made them feel like they had true ownership over their missions. It was a brilliant move, honestly. It earned him their total respect, and it just proves, you don't have to be the loudest voice in the room to be a powerful leader. So we've looked at 3 really different and really successful leaders. But now we get to the part where it all comes together. It's something we can call the leader's paradox. And it's this kind of mind-bending idea that for every single one of them, their absolute greatest strength was also their most fatal flaw.
Let me break it down for you. You've got Cao Cao, whose incredible decisiveness bled into hasty suspicion and paranoia. You've got Liu Bei, whose powerful virtue made him vulnerable to emotional, sometimes irrational, indecision. And then there's Sun Quan, whose wonderful collaborative nature often led to really costly hesitation. It's crazy, right? In every single case, their biggest strength held the seeds of their biggest weakness. So you've got to be asking, if they were all so flawed, how did they succeed? What was the secret sauce? Well, despite all their differences, they had something crucial in common. Yeah, they all surrounded themselves with expert advisors, that's a given. But here's the real key: they knew how to listen selectively, not just absolutely. They didn't just take every piece of advice that came their way. They knew how to filter it, how to weigh it, and then they made the final call themselves. That balance, that was everything. And that kind of brings this whole thing back around to you. We've seen the hardcore pragmatist, the virtuous moralist, and the patient inheritor. 3 totally different paths to power, and each one has its own highs and its own lows. So I'll leave you with this one final thought. If you had to choose, which one of these leaders would you want to work for? Think about it, because the answer probably says a lot about what kind of leader you are and what you really value.